We have to my close left side, Barry Rosen. He has been working with artist estates since almost 40 years, namely the estate of Eva Hesse. He started to work with in 1977, but also the estate of Lee Lozano and Alan Caprow, amongst others. He has published extensively, for example, on Eva Hesse, her diaries, and not only that he published them, he transcribed them, imagine every little single word, because as he told me, interpreting is an important part of transcribing, very impressive. And of course also the catalogue raisonné, painting and sculpture is out. He's currently working on the drawing volume. If I may add that, and it's, I think, public knowledge, on the commercial side, he's working with Hauser and Wirth, and maybe the right way to put that is the estates he's advising work with Hauser and Wirth, and we'll go to that later. I already see your alarming view. Barry Rosen is on the board of, I would think, 50 to 100 institutional bodies, and some of them you see listed in the program. Of those that aren't listed, about another 20. He gave me 3 I could mention. I chose one, and that is the board of the Fruit Market Gallery, a contemporary art exhibition space in Edinburgh. I thought this was really interesting. Google it. Dr. Dietmar Elger, on the far left, already worked in the 1980s with Gerhard Richter, acting as his secretary in the studio. Since then, he has had a curator's career in stately museums, namely the Museum am Ostwall in Dortmund and the Sprengel Museum in Hannover. And today he is the director of the Gerhard Richter Archive, which is an institute of staatliche Kunstsammlungen in Dresden. Again, somebody who has published extensively, not only on Gerhard Richter, on very many artists he worked with, he curated exhibitions with or for, but of course he has a center of his academic work around the oeuvre of Gerhard Richter. He published the first catalogue raisonné in 1986. Since then, very many volumes on various aspects of Richter's work, and currently the renewed, new, current catalogue raisonné in 5 volumes. The first appeared 2011. And I therewith hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here. When I heard the lectures before, they touched already some interesting issues that our office has been confronted with now as the director of the Gerhard Richter Archive, also as a curator in museums. I'm working for the museum since '86 in Dortmund and Hanover, and I'm also now a 20% curator at the Albertinum at the Staatliche Kunstsammlung. So it's a split job, the archive and the curating job for the collection in Dresden. So the Gerhard Richter Archive is not an estate. The artist is very well alive, and we also will never be an estate. So whenever the situation will change, there will be an estate and there will be an archive. So both will have different duties and will do their own jobs, but will not merge into one institution. And from what I will tell you next, you will also hope to understand that you will see the advantages of both of it. And the archive has a big advantage now that we can get material from the artist early. So we are somebody who looks after the material in the studio and get hold of it. So there's a lot of things that will be thrown away. There are a lot of things that had been thrown away, unfortunately. And so since 10 years now, since the archive was founded, we're always looking after material. The assistants in the studio put things away. We say, look at things and say, oh, this is something for the archive. And sometimes Gerhard Richter, as recently, writes a note on something where it says a garbage or archive. And then we mostly decide for archive. And so Richter is not always, he has a different perspective as an artist to what is might be interesting for public also, or for an archive. And so he does not really see what we think is interesting or might be interesting for us to keep and to think. And we have really wonderful things that had been gone to the garbage if we have not looked after it. So this is a big advantage, that you not only start with collecting what you have when the artist is dead, but at a very early point we look after a lot of information. And wir können das Bild da machen. And you really begin collecting early for the archive. So we have the artist here, we have the archive space, we get a second space because we are packed with material now, and there's a detail from catalogs, and it's getting more and more. Each year it's not getting more, but it's getting more each year. So each year we collect more material, so it increases immensely. So the archive was founded in 2006 after the flood in Dresden, which was in 2002, and there was a, so this is a longer story to the thing. This is images from the flood in Dresden 2002. After the flood, there was a charity auction by Elger Achenbach, somebody still knows him. And Gerhard Richter donated a large abstract painting for this auction, the Felds. It's our next image also. This is the painting that Gerhard Richter donated for the auction. And this auction brought in 3.4 million euro for the reconstruction or a new construction of a storage space for the Albertinum. And the Felds, it's only brought 2.6 million, so there are 800,000 euro more for the other 44 artists. So it was a big gesture by Richter to his birth town. Then after the auction took place and the painting was sold, the buyer, the collector, offered it to the museum as a long-term loan. Richter was very impressed by this gesture and gave a lot of additional works from his personal collection. So in 2004, 3 spaces with his work, exclusively with his works, were opened at the Albertinum for about, there was another exhibition for a short term, I would say, because there was also an exhibition of the October cycle. And then in 2006, just 1 month before I came there, everything was put away in storage because there was the reconstruction of the Albertinum. And then it was reopened in 2010, and with instead of 3 spaces, with 2 spaces only, that gave a good overview of his career from the 60s to very much recent works. And the Felds, who is still with us, was like a metaphor for Felds holding up to the water, like ein Fels gegen die Brandung in German. What? Ich habe es nicht verstanden. Doesn't matter. So after the exhibition was there with the free spaces in 2004, Martin Roth came up with, he was a former director in Dresden at that time, and came up with the idea of an archive, and contacted Gerhard Richter and say, wouldn't it be great if we also have an archive and not only show the paintings? And this was a very clever idea, because I guess what was behind this idea was that the artist cannot really remove his paintings that easily when there is at the same time his archive in Dresden. So this would hold him back a little bit and makes also the loan of the paintings a little bit more stable. And on the other side, it gives also, it fulfills two things from the museum. It was an exhibition that was there, and it was a kind of research institution with the archive. But on the other hand, nobody has an idea what the archive should be and what it should do. And so when I came in, I was friends asked me to request several questions and said, what would be the duty of the archive if there is a studio? So what is the archive doing if there's a studio who answers questions and is operating in exhibition projects and so? But from the beginning on, I would say it would make sense, because there are different, we found our duties that are separated from the studios, who both have their things that they do. So in exhibitions, it was like the studio is taking care of current exhibitions and forthcoming exhibitions, and our project was the former exhibitions. People asked for exhibitions in the 70s and the 60s, what was exhibited, asking for photographic material, documentaries about these exhibitions, and things like that. So there was a quite good split between both of us. Besides of that, we have 3 columns of working fields that we fulfill. So the first is that we collect all material on Gerhard Richter, and this not only means Gerhard Richter catalogs, but also all catalogs with at least an illustration by Gerhard Richter in it, or some other very minor publications. This is, sometimes you would say this is, you can look it up in a library or so, you don't need to have it, or sometimes I can look it also up in a bookstore and make a photograph of the relevant page. But it showed that that it's good that we have these also minor publications, because we sometimes need them. We need them for the catalog raisonné anyway. We need them twice for the catalog raisonné if there comes up some questions like who was the owner at which time, who is it illustrated correctly? How is it illustrated in this catalog? How is it illustrated in that catalog? So we can look up very exotic catalogs, how the work was illustrated there, but maybe it's a catalog from the collection, then the chance is good that is the right illustration that we have there. So we have invitation cards, we have posters, we have exhibition folders, we collect press material, we have 2 press services who send us material via internet or also in hard copy. We have a lot of photographic material from the studio, so we have nearly fully scanned Gerhard's negative archive. So we have thousands of photographs that include the Atlas photographs, but also a lot more. And we are also giving away these type of photographs for publication. These are portrait photographs, installation shots, studio shots, works installed in other situations also, especially this type of not reproduction material of works, but this kind of biographical related material. We have also bought manuscripts. We have two large correspondence with friends in Dresden that went from the late 50s to 64, and so started when Gerhard was still in Dresden and went on for the first years in Düsseldorf, and are very interesting because he speaks about his very first years and how he's struggling with his art or with his life. And we bought this for high prices. The problem with Gerhard Richter in anything is that there are private collectors that are also interested in buying ephemera or are collecting ephemera material. So there's always competition with private collectors, and prices get quite high, not so high as if we buy paintings, but they are substantial. We have drafts for several books, like what we bought from the that time gallery. Oh, this. You see the felts here installed in Dresden at the moment, and then we have the draft for the book at Gallery H in Hanover, together with Dietmar Polke, that we bought from the gallery who made the catalog. And we also have works of art. So when we started, we do not have works of art. I also do not wanted to have works of art because they are so expensive to buy. It was not really possible to buy something substantial. But then at a point, we got offered something, and with the help of institutions like Kulturstiftung der Länder, a painting was bought, so this was the beginning, and then later Gerhard Richter also donated to us several works so that we have a small collection now, and we are always happy to lend it out and to be with our archives, so present in the world and in other museums, so that people can see the works that we have, and we are also happy to support exhibitions with the few works we at least have. So what was something we also got once, and from Gerhard Richter, and is this material that said garbage or archive, is this floor plan for his installation in the Venice Biennial in 1972, that even for me was very unknown before. Even I worked for him in the mid-'80s. I was wondering how many things show up now after I worked 2 years in the mid-'80s, and I've never saw anything of this, and I don't know where he kept it at that time. But now things like this showed up, and we got it then, and it was safe for us. And for me, it's one of our highlights, and will be reproduced in the next volume of the catalog Raisonné, which will cover these years around the early 70s, but we have out more already. So our second job is the job of what we call a helper. So we help others with their projects, exhibition projects, publication projects, students who write their dissertation or write other works, seminar works or so. And we help with requests to Gerhard Richter that we either answer by ourselves or forward to the studio or tell the people that it is useless to forward it, and they think about different ideas. So there are really a lot of requests that we get. We get a lot of requests about authenticity. So mostly it's far from being a Richter, but people think they have a Richter. Sometimes it's not even Richter written as a signature. It's definitely some other name, but people try everything also. But we also do certificates of authenticity. We don't write certificates of non-authenticity. So if it's not a Richter, we tell them and don't charge. But if it's authentic and people want an authentication, we write this. It's a very nice form with an image and so, and my signature. And it's Gerhard instructed us to do this. And we charge a fee of 400 euro for this. Very often it's not necessary. So it's a painting, it's in 5 catalogs illustrated, but people like to have it. So, and if they want to have it, we do it also because we earn some money for this. There are also, it's also that the authenticity question is also that we have been asked by prosecutors, is it correct, the Staatsanwaltschaft? Yeah, by prosecutors to look at works and write a command if it's an authentic work or not, and then it was not an authentic work. And it never happened that I have to appear at court to testimony, because it's always in the sand sometimes. But what is important for the prosecution is that, for the law and at court is that they don't want to have the confirmation of the artist, so that the artist says it's not by me. Because the other side of the, in this case, is saying, he sold it under the desk beside and does not pay tax for it. And now he's saying it's a fault or it's not by him or so. So they are more happy if we say something than the artist would say something. But at the end, the artist is a more reliable and better source. Usually I ask the artist and then I have my estimate or so. What is in the second? So this is like a helper. So calls come in, emails come in every day, and so we ask things. They have strange questions or whatever. But this is a very important part because I think an estate does not want to do it or does not can do it, because it's so much work to do and it's sometimes so nerving that an estate does not really want to take care of this. For us, it's fine. It's our job. We see this is our job to answer these questions, to answer them quickly, and to be helpful, to send people send them a copy of a text from a catalog or something like this. This is not possible, I guess, for the work of an estate. So it's good that it's separated and things go through us. Sometimes it's also good that things go to us before they get to the studio. We also not release to studios contact information to anybody. So our third column are our own projects. So if we do not have to do anything to do for somebody else, we have our own projects, what keeps us busy. So this is the biggest own project is the catalog Raisonné. So we have 3 volumes out, and if you look at it, it's 1, 3, and 4. And volume 2 is coming soon, beginning of next year. Also, we're in the last process of editing the volume 2. So then we have out 4, and we will end with 6. So we split it differently, and now we have, instead of 5, we have 6 volumes. So I'm working on, I did it in 84, 85 when I was secretary to Gerhard Richter. And then I started again in 2003 with this new one. The other one was, you can't compare it to this 86 one. I started it as a private project in 2003 and then brought it in the archive in 2006. And from the view now, one has to really say it wouldn't be possible to realize it as a private project. So it's 600 pages, volumes. But it's fine, it's our project, it's a project of the archive, and it's no better than with the archive. So this is the big third column that we do, the catalog raisonné. We have done other publication projects, we have done symposia, we do other things, like cooperating with exhibitions and things like this. So we have 3 columns that we fill, and so we are always busy with collecting the material, providing the material, and editing material in the 3rd column. So this is very practical for us. And when I said or talked about these questions that I was faced with before I start, one other question was that people said, are you sure you want to ask only for one artist? Isn't that boring? Only one artist, always one artist. But as it turned out, there's a big variety of things that you do. You do it always with, for, or about Gerhard Richter, but you do a lot of different things. So it's nothing as boring at all, but on the other hand, the advantage is you know everything, yeah? So it's a very small field, but in this field, you know everything. You can answer each question, and don't try to force me in the question. But usually I can answer everything. So the other question was, this was a question that I took to myself, what happens if nobody is interested in his archive? I had the fear that I go there, I sit there with my archive, I build it up, and nobody calls. This was a big fear, yeah? You sit there and nobody is interested in your archive. Also, this never was a serious question because we had a lot of requests, as I said. Our archive is not a separate archive, but we are part of the Staatlichen Kunstsammlungen in Dresden. And this is a very important point for us. It helps us, I think, a lot. I always thought that it's good for me if I have my letterhead and it says Gerhard Richter Archive, Staatliche Kunstsammlung in Dresden. This gives us some substantial standing. Yeah, it's not just a private institution, and if you write to somebody like a private collector, if you're private yourself, they may are afraid to answer, to give up their addresses or something like this. They fear that their information get somewhere that they don't control. It's more reliable if you are a public institution. So this, for us, was a very big advantage. And also the advantage is we are financed from 2 sources, like private sources and different private sources, surely the artists also, and public sources from the Staatliche Kunstsammlungen. So we have a good balance of private and public money. And it helps also with the authentication process because the authenticity certificates also have the letterhead of the Staatliche Kunstsammlung. It helps with the catalog raisonné, and it helps on the other side also the Staatliche Kunstsammlung because museums in the last years not only looking for exhibiting and storaging and buying artworks, they also want to be scientific institution, especially in Dresden. They do a lot to be also regarded as a scientific institution and an archive that works differently and is doing research, is a scientific institution, and this is also good for the staatliche Kunstsammlung. We're always mentioned when they want to say what they are, what all the things they are doing, great things they are doing. So then we're always on the agenda. And what I also said, we are answering for the artist or about the artist all the questions that, happily, all the questions that nobody would answer and nobody would be interested beside of the people asking. So thank you very much. Maybe some questions. Well,
so questions will be
later.
At the end of the turn.
We don't hear it, but Alan Capra is supposed to be speaking. Well, my original idea was that we would have an introduction by Alan Capra in his 1966 piece called How to Make a Happening. But even this is, yes?
This is a lecture on how to make it happening. There are 11 rules of the game. 1, forget all the standard art forms. Don't paint pictures, don't make poetry, don't build architecture, don't arrange dances, don't write plays, don't compose music, don't make movies. And above all, don't think you'll get a happening out of putting all these together.
Perfect.
This idea is nothing more than what operas always did, and you see it today in the far-out types of discotheques with their flashing lights and film projections. The point is to make something new, something that doesn't even remotely remind you of culture. You've got to be pretty ruthless about this, wiping out of your plans every echo of this or that story or jazz piece or painting that I can promise you will keep coming up unconsciously. 2.
That's enough. So that's Alan Capra and what he thought about life in 1966. But in 1998, he sold his archive to the Getty. And was that a good idea? I think we don't know. And I'm sort of going to try to give a kind of survey of different archival problems, because I'm no expert on archives, but they asked me to talk about them. So as we see, I mean, the Getty may or may not be a good idea. I mean, it's major and big, and it makes his works, because all the programs for his works are included in the archives, a little inaccessible unless you go to LA. So, but another form, I don't know how these work actually, but you just, but generally, there's a more realistic way that people in the arts have to deal with the problem of the generation of documents and materials. So these, for instance, are part of the archive of a place called just above Midtown, which was an important interdisciplinary artist space, I got this from the Google, that supported new work of emerging artists. It was the first gallery to exhibit the work of African American artists and other artists of color. So that operated by a woman called Linda Good Bryant in the 70s and 80s, and then shut down. But in the meantime, this material has been in storage and is now about to emerge, and they're just starting to work on the archive, but you see, compared to, say, the Getty, that it's a rather homely way of doing it. Another kind of example, oh, that's part of her archive, a letter from the Modern, these other documents. But another kind of archive, more personal perhaps, and recently Dorothy Beskind, who is a photographer who made a lot of films of artists in their studios, including Eva Hesse, the only documentation of Eva Hesse working in her studio, died last year. But she had an enormous body of work that was kind of like this at her house. And they've been working now to put it together, but they don't know how to do that. And I think some of the earlier conversations in the conference has been about how people face these problems. But then we have somebody more like this, Dieter Roth. And Dieter Roth kept a lot of records, and we know kept a lot of material in his studio. And we are now just starting to deal with the reality of his archive, which is varied because included in all these boxes and things are, oops, that's the wrong person, works of art, as well as all the documentation for his projects and his business life, really. Another form of person, I'm sorry this is going to be really brief, is called Dale Chihuly, and he moved his studio to Seattle in 1980, and since that time, his way of tracking his work evolved from pinning Polaroids on foam core in a kind of bin, and you could look at it, till now he has a full archivist who keeps track of everything, every image, all things are accessible, and it's pretty much ready to go when that might have to happen. So, I guess, I don't have a summation of what makes sense with this material, but I do think that there's something more realistic to consider than the eventuality of an enormous institutional practice like the Getty or MoMA. And I think that's all I wanted to say about it. But I have also these nice films because I thought it would be good for us to remember why we're interested in all this, because we're interested in artists and what they make. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Barry. Just to continue where you stopped, when you said it can go to the MoMA, it can go to the Getty, is the museum really the right place to have an archive, or shouldn't it be independent or at a university?
Well, I don't know. I think that in a lot of respects it was a mistake for Alan to have sold his archive to the Getty. I suppose the money was nice, but it meant that for a long time what was happening there was inaccessible because they didn't make, it was in 1998, so they didn't scan everything. There was not a full copy left in the studio. And even though the estate has access to the Getty material, in order to do that, you have to go there. So is that a good thing? It's preserved it, and it might not have been preserved, strangely enough, yeah.
But in a sense, it's exactly the situation you have. You have the studio in Cologne, you have the archive in Dresden. What's the relationship between the two? So if the artist wants to know something about his 1972 Venice exhibition, he turns to you. He doesn't have an own record in his studio, does he?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. We have from this, let's say, gallery correspondence, and we have scan material, and he has the hard copy, but there is not really very much documentary material besides from the, let's say, last 20 years where he did some bigger works like with glass pans, and so he has his construction plans with him, and some other glass works where all the cathedral window and so. So this is with him in the studio. But from the earlier years, there are only gallery correspondence, which started very nicely with really letters and information and so, and then gets more and more formal, like list of, we sent you that, this is other prizes, This is a transport information, this is transport papers also. There is no really, for us it's sometimes interesting, so we see what went to this gallery, what went to that gallery, and we have also copies of this, but there are no really big papers. And in the 70s, for the material in the 70s, he threw away a lot. So there was a point when he wanted to get rid of all this material, mostly gallery correspondence, and there's a gap where we have no information at all, like no gallery correspondence, I would say from mid-70s to early 90s. He moved in the early 90s and then he threw away a lot.
He had to clear out before that. Benoit Archive. Can it be expected that once the artist passes away, the estate will hand over what the studio is still holding in archival material to your side, or will there be a coexistence of two forms? Do you already foresee that?
I can imagine that a specific material that is not really needed, like old correspondences, get as hardcovers to us, yes. And we take care of that. So the gallery or the studio will go on existing like a contact institution for copyright requests and giving out photographic material and working with the exhibitions that will be organized and supervising this maybe, and also giving loans from the works that are still with the studio.
Listening to you, Barry, we all understand that the Alan Capro model, which is the Gerhard Richter model to a certain extent, would not be your best choice or first choice. I mean, since you are the role model for so many people in that room here, having started 1977, when I look around, so many people in this room weren't born in 1977. In hindsight, is there something you can say today, I should have done differently, or one should do differently than we did it in the late 70s, 80s?
Well, I think it was a very different time. I mean, a lot of the functions that you make for Gerhard Richter are the same functions that galleries provide artists at that level too. I mean, I take that to mean he just prefers to manage everything himself, and you're the arm of that can do that. But a lot of these kinds of things are already in place starting in the 60s, really. So do I think it's important to keep all these things? Yes, because I think it provides a history. Should it go to an institution? I think it's better when it's your own institution, for instance, because you have more access to it, perhaps. But I don't know, is there something we should have done? No, I never think that way, really.
Well, accessibility is an important factor, because when you have an external institution, an institute actually in this case, it should be open for everybody. What's the kind of the gate control? You are the gatekeeper for Eva Hesse, you are the gatekeeper for Gerhard Richter, or can somebody come and do research in your institution?
This is part of our Hauptbau job, that you can come and research in place in the archive. So we make appointments. Nobody can come by, just this would disturb. But also we make appointments. We ask what they are looking for, so we can prepare material for them. So they are not coming, and then they say, I'm looking for the October cycle. And then we run and look what we can offer them from the October cycle. So we know this a week before or so we can find out what is proper material for them. It will be on the desk when they come, and then they look at this first material, and then they can ask for more material. Yeah, but we do not have them in the archive instantly, and then they say, what do you have about the October cycle? And then we get up and run. Yeah. So we make appointments, and also what is well, they are in our room. We only have one room, so they are sitting. There's a place, but sitting in the same room as we are working, which sometimes can be a problem because we're also doing telephone calls, and we have to be careful what we say sometimes.
But you don't filter. When you give access, you show everything you have in that certain...
You can say we filter because with the October cycle it's too much to give them everything, yeah? So there's a lot of material that's irrelevant. So we give them the important things first, then they can ask for more. If they want to see every newspaper review, we can also show that, if they want to see it. But normally with 10 books and important articles, it's fine for you. What we do not do is, sometimes people are from school or so, yeah, and they have to write something for school. Then we say there are also some books at the library. There's a library at the Staatliche Kunstsammlung, and we send them there first and say, look there, they want something mostly general about Gerhard Richter. Look at the books there first, and if you then have a deeper interest, then you can come to us, because I do not say anything about 10 class people, but it's not necessary to research at the archive.
I think everybody understands that.
Everybody who's responsible for major artists does the same thing. They make the research possible and available and accommodate people who are appropriate to accommodate. I mean, it's true, nobody wants school kids. But I think everybody else, I mean, they make dates at the various locations where these things might be. I mean, even when I was working on the Eva Hesse diaries, I had to do it sitting at the next desk to the registrar at Oberlin College, because their acquisition does drawings, so they can't be removed, and she has to be present at all times. So I think that's not any different. It's just like you have a special place where all of that is dedicated to Gerhard Richter, whereas, you know, other people have that same situation like that, but at the gallery, or in the case of Alan Capro, you know, the Getty is digitizing everything, and soon you'll be able to find things online, and so maybe that's better, just in terms of scale, but I don't know. I think it's the same.
So if the artist doesn't want something in the archive, the filter is kind of before it comes to the archive. We all remember Hélène saying this morning there was this letter by her father and she wasn't sure whether that should actually go. Did you ever come across kind of family members, Eva Hesse's sister, saying, I don't want to have this part?
She's the most wonderful person.
That's great, anyway.
I mean, I think there's no...
The answer was she's the most wonderful person, and I said that's great anyway.
So no, I think there's not a lot that's concealed. One of the reasons that we did publish the diaries is because people could only read them in their entirety by going to Oberlin, which is a very difficult thing to do, actually. And so when questions would arise, I mean, it was complicated for the people to learn the information. Then we had to vet it. There were all kinds of things, but in fact, in those diaries, there's nothing to hide, and I think what there is very important. So, no, I don't think so. And Dieter wrote, weirdly, had no secrets.
Told them all himself. Remaining with the influence of the artist for a second, I just realized there is an online information website on the internet called gerhardrichter.com. That is not a part of your institution, and I understand it's not a part of the studio, is it? What's the relationship between the three?
It's one can say it's a fan site that is organized and financed by a collector.
Not selling fan articles. Quite surprised. Can you give us
fan
the name?
site.
Is it public? Who does it?
It was always very, very closed.
Secret. Okay.
It's very secret. Now it's more public, but we keep it. We don't.
We keep it low key. We won't send it around with the email addresses then. Okay. So that's very interesting that somebody kind of, he could fund the institution in Dresden instead with that money rather than having that fan site. Don't you think?
Funded 3 times. Or
3 times.
But he has a relationship to Gerhard. It's not that it's somebody else nobody knows. He has a relationship to Gerhard. He's befriended with Gerhard, but it's not by Gerhard. He does not control it, or so he has surely allowed it that it's existing because it's a copyright issue also, but it's not looked after by Gerhard Richter.
But it indicates, or it shows the artist that kind of the control of kind of what's the truth about me, myself, and I being the artist is out there. And actually your institution is the best example for that. Why is it already at an institution, at a museum, so to speak? Why is it not a subsidiary of the studio, or is there Gerhard Richter Foundation already?
Not yet. It's Martin Roth asked. Nobody came up with the idea. Also, Düsseldorf could have the idea, or Cologne, where he lived since 20 years at that time, could have come up with an idea to have an archive together with at the Museum Ludwig or so. Nobody had the idea, and they also do not know what it should do. Yeah, when Gerhard proposed me, and Martin Roth visited me, and I told him what I want to do with the archive. So I said, I want to do the catalog raisonné. In 2 years we do a symposium. In 3 years we do the first volume. In 4 years we do a book publication of the writings. And so I had a master plan for the next 10 years. And he said, oh, that's great, that's what I wanted to hear. I'm sure he do not have the idea, they only had the idea archive, yeah? It sounds great, archive, very scientific and so, but they had no idea how to fill it, yeah? So I could fill it like I wanted to fill it, yeah? So I have the relationship to the studio, and we have to look at what we are doing, what the studio is doing, and it became very clear and very easy to fill in and fill a gap where we can do our thing. And even now, what was also obvious from the beginning on, that I want to be also in Cologne. Yeah, I had my apartment in Cologne first, and only in Dresden from Hanover. So from the beginning on, I said, I also want to have the right to be in Cologne. And when I'm in Cologne, I go to the studio, and now I'm also doing, a lot of things go through Cologne, not only through Gerhard Richter, but also through other contact. I meet a lot of more people in Cologne than in Dresden. Nobody comes by in Dresden, but I meet a lot of people in Cologne or in Düsseldorf and around this area. So being in Cologne, for me, from the beginning on, was very important, and still is, and I have full access to the studio. I can go there. I always call before I come, but I've never got turned down. So sometimes I'm busy on Friday, so it's then I come on Monday or so. But beside of that, can also be there. And I have my working place is in the old studio where he worked until '93, before he moved to the place where it is now. So I'm going there in the studio and sit there at the desk.
I'm sure close contact to the studio and the artist is essential for your work. Is it public, or may I ask how the institute is funded? Is it part of the? I mean, is the financial side part of the institutional side, or is it part of the Gerhard Richter side, or?
I always say it's a public-private partnership in some way. So up to now, you also have to be aware that we have no written contract or agreement. Yeah, so we're doing this since 10 years. There's no paper that's saying the staatliche Kunstsammlung is allowed to use the name Gerhard Richter Archive. Nothing, no paper, nothing, and it works good. Now we have we're doing a paper that will be signed soon. Hope it goes on like this, and And the funding is, so I have this side job at the gallery, so I have 80% archive, 20% gallery Neue Meister. This will be changed when we have signed the contract, because I always had enough work to do for the archive. And with 20% for the gallery, you cannot do really substantial work. So I want to work 80%, 100% archive. My job will be paid by the Staatliche Kunstsammlung Dresden, and we have a operating budget, which started with 20 and or 15, then 20, then 0, then it goes up to 40. But sometimes we have a budget cut 20% or 10%. So 40 is the limit from the Staatliche Kunstsammlung, and then we have private money, mostly from the artists, but also from other sources.
I
also can say we spend about 100,000 a year, but I also have 2 assistants working for me 6 days a week. So they overlap. And I have to pay this from my operating budget, which is more than 40.
I liked your smile when you said we also have private money. Knowing the current prices for Gerhard Richter abstract oil paintings, I assume when you say 15 and 20, you don't mean millions, but thousands, do you?
Well, always thousands.
Barry, in a sense, you've always been lucky because you were curating with works and artist oeuvres. You were also looking after the estate. Is working with an estate a good tool to understand what else is going on around that artist? Because everybody who wants to know something has to come to you because you are kind of reigning over the archive. Is it a tool? Is it a... can you also... as Mayan Beckmann said it this morning, can you also decide not to allow something just by your behavior or your attitude or your opinion?
Maybe by my behavior. No. Well, it once happened, a curator called me and said, wouldn't it be fun to do an Eva Hesse exhibition? And I said, do you have an idea? Call back. That person never called back, so.
That's a very kind of soft control, I would call that. Actually, I have to admit, I saw Loretta last week in London, where she presented the Institute at a big conference, and she also pointed out that when you look at artist estates, and of course, on at first sight, this doesn't mean the archive. You should also look into remaining present on the art market. And I mentioned Hauser and Wirth earlier, and Gerhard Richter is one. I mean, you can't think of an artist being more present. Then you also hear of archives sold, like the one Alan Capro sold to the Getty. We even heard of Harry Seemann's archive moving to LA. I happen to know that the most expensive archive ever sold made £32 million back in 2006. What about the so-called commercial value an estate in the archive material represents? Is that something that needs to be thought of, insured, controlled?
I don't know. You hear about people selling their archives to the Modern bought Martha Wilson's archive. The Getty buys many archives. I mean, they're around, kind of. I don't know how they're valued, really, because I don't think that way. And I'm sure I don't think they should be insured, except for maybe fire or something.
Electronic bugs, maybe. Well, Dresden just acquired a nice group of archives from the Mazzona collection. Is there kind of a...
Very recent, and we are not really, we are not really know a lot about it, or nearly nothing about it, because we are not involved in it. We haven't been asked, so actually I cannot really definitely say anything about it. It's huge, and they renovate a building for it, and they hire 8 people. They want to hire 8 people to inventory it. Well, we're a little bit jealous. That's the only thing I can say.
I'm sure they would say the same. I think we can open up for questions, shall we?
Hi, just a practical question, but what kind of software do you use for your archive?
My assistant's working with the archive. I have also with this computer stuff. I do not give anything in the computer. I have a self-made software for the catalog resume that was done by the secretary in Hanover when I was still there and started it. And the whole SKD have a photo program for inventorying photographic material. But besides that, I have no idea. When I want to know something, I ask.
I am De Pisis from Milano, and I would like to know if Dr. Elger keeps an archive also for the works if he considers not authentic.
Archive for the Yes, we also document we have a folder, not Richter works, but sometimes there are works that are so far away from Richter, yeah, that we do not even dare to put them in there. It's too ridiculous. Yeah, we answer them saying this is absolutely not Richter, but then we do not put it in because it wouldn't make sense. It's too really ridiculous sometimes. But beside of that, yes, we have a photo because they are not always fakes, yes? The people think it's a Richter, but it's not a fake because it's even if there's a Richter names on it, it seems to be some other Richter because it's not tried to. But we also have fakes, and then it's good to have this because fakes show up from time to time, the same fakes.
That will make a great publication, by the way, one day when you publish all the Richters, like the Peter Dirk case just recently.
Hello, Markus Eisenweis, Van Aert Estates. I have a question to the both of you. How do you see the future for archives? I think it's a little bit strange situation. You're talking about to digitalize existing archives, and we live in a digital world, so more things are done by email, all the documents are done by computer. But how do you preserve emails? I mean, I always think what we do is gone when the computer breaks down, if you change your server, and then all these archive information, what has been on paper before, will be lost. Is there a strategy for the future? I mean, Gerhard Richter, I'm sure he makes all his correspondence via emails, so there must be a way to store this as well.
I guess the studio is keeping all these emails because they need to keep track on it. When there comes a question that relates to something 2 years ago or so, they can still find it. We very often print out. Yeah, it says do not print out. We print out, and then we take it away as hard copy together with a letter or some other things, and put it at the right place in a folder or we have the documents for each work or so where we can put in things together with a photograph that has been sent or things like this. So we print out a lot, and the studio keeps a lot in the computer on a hard disk. But we are not. I'm not into this, so I'm also not asking for their current correspondence. I stopped in about 2000. Yeah, I do not want it to go too close to actual business. Yeah, I want to keep a distance to what they are working on now and what they are dealing with and corresponding with galleries or with other people. So we have copies until 2000, and these are all hard copies, and we have scanned this material. It's mostly, recent things are mostly about gallery information, lists of works, price lists and things like this, invoices or so. Yeah. So we're not really in this. Also in general, for us, I guess it's not possible to scan our archive, which also holds a lot of books, magazines, things like that, catalogs. So we have this as books and so on.
So it's a little bit difficult situation. You scan old documents and you print out emails.
Yes. Oh, and we also print out the old documents, so have them, a lot of these are print out again, so scanned and then printed out again. So we have them in the folder, so like the correspondence is are in different folders and also.
But this is because the hard copies are still with the studio.
It's just me, it's an old guy. So.
More questions?
Giuseppe Calabi from Milan. We know that in Germany there is a reform that has been passed recently on heritage law. Do you think that an archive like the Richter archive could be declared or classified as, under heritage law provisions, or this is something that would never or could never occur in Germany?
So most we have, when it comes to Dresden, it will be inventoried, and then it's owned by the staatliche Kunstsammlungen. So a lot of things, all the things Richter gave as donations are inventoried as owned by the staatliche Kunstsammlungen. So it does not really approach us because it's state-owned and cannot be brought away and sold anyway. Yeah, so it's all the material that comes in are donated or bought works and become ownership of the staatliche Kunstsammlungen. So there are very, very few loans that we have.
That's been a very good question because now we know it's stately owned. I think that's been that, and I hand over back to Loretta. Thank you.